Man, we knew the Sixers weren't done making some big additions to the offseason. Not just Paul George and Caleb Martin and Andre
Quinones time, baby.
Yes, it is. Get it ready. Get that name right, because you're going to hear a lot of it during the course of this next 5 days at least, as Lester Quinones signs with the Philadelphia 76ers on a two-way deal. We'll talk about that a lot more. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Podcast alongside Derek Bodner, Kyle Neubeck. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna here producing all of you in the chat. As always, on this rainy Wednesday here, I had no idea, but I am in my hoodie, so I'm nice and warm and toasty. And,
I'm a little too toasty.
Well, after you
gotta get some practice
shots going in. Got to get some practice in for training camp. You got to get that going. We have a lot to talk about. We'll get to Lester Quinones in just a bit to talk about the two-way contract. And if you say, wait a minute, I thought all three of their two-way contracts slots were locked in. Well, this guy to my right, he has some news on that one. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we do have to begin with Paul George as we continue our season preview. Paul George, we know, was the big splash. We mentioned all these other names as we talked about the camp battles yesterday. Eric Gordon being one of them, Reggie Jackson a piece of that. We mentioned Andre Drummond towards the end, Caleb Martin being a part of the offseason additions, as well as the rookies in Adem Bona and Jared McCain. But it's not just Paul George and the players on this roster, and we've discussed the teams that they're going to have to face in the Eastern Conference, fighting for the top three, maybe even the top spot outside of Boston for the right to at least walk into the postseason with the number one seed overall, hosting the playoffs throughout. Everything has to run through Philadelphia if they do their part. But what about the other fresh faces, maybe moving from one spot to another, and the acquisitions that may be helping them put that particular team over the top? And that's what we wanted to start today. Kyle, looking at, of course, Paul George, the biggest acquisition we really think as we talk about the entire offseason was Paul George. How much money he got, the 4-year deal, everything that went with the Clippers side, Golden State walking into the conversation as well, and the Sixers landing that big third guy to go with Embiid and Maxey. But they weren't the only ones to make the big moves. And while we have talked about them, we are now less than a week away from the start of media day and training camp. And we need to talk about some of those players that could be just as impactful for their specific teams and challenging Boston and Philadelphia in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and so I think the point of separation between the Sixers and signing Paul George and, for example, the Knicks getting Mikal Bridges are that because the Sixers set this up as the cap space offseason, they have made more of these impactful additions, right? Like they got Paul George and they got Caleb Martin and they got Andre Drummond, and it's more of like you're filling out the roster with these big additions rather than just you get the headliner. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you were to, we put together a list before the show, I think really if you're just talking about singular addition, the only guy in the East who's comparable is Mikal, right? Like it's him versus Paul. Now you want to say Mikal's younger. He goes to a team that that beat the Sixers outright and went further than them last season, that has that, 1A guy in Brunson that people believe in. Certainly you can make a case that the Knicks had the best addition of the offseason in the East. I think that's offset, not all the way, certainly, but at least somewhat by the fact that Hartenstein left, goes to OKC. And on top of that, the recent news that we talked about on the show this week that Mitchell Robinson will miss time. So they're going to have to figure some things out there. Is Julius Randle going to play the 5? How much do you lean on Mikal as a secondary creator versus using him as that, dynamic off ball, whether it's as a shooter, as a cutter, connective passer? What does his role look like in that offense? I think the reason I still keep the Sixers at the top of just like the offseason list is because there's less to figure out, presumably. It is just like plug and play, right? Like you drop Paul George into a team, and Mikal is certainly in that, category of player, right? I think Mikal Bridges could play on any team in the league and find success. It's really just a matter of kind of figuring out what it looks like when it's not just the Jalen Brunson show all the time, which is kind of how it operated there last year.
Yeah. So, Devon, you yelled at me yesterday because you asked me a question and I went off script. So I'm just going to say very directly on point, Alex Sarr is objectively a bigger addition than Paul George. He's 7 foot. Paul George is only 6'9". I don't know what you're talking about.
This is fair. Yeah,
So Washington wins the offseason by definition.
Okay, how about Risacher?
I think Sarr has him by an inch.
Okay.
I think Risacher is 6'11".
All
Anyway, it doesn't matter. I was making a joke, a really
both
bad
taller.
joke. I understand it was a bad joke. That was the point. But anyway, moving on. I think when you're talking about actually who had the best offseason, it comes down to the Knicks and the Sixers. I think the Knicks have bigger losses than the Sixers had in terms of Hartenstein, whereas not allowed to say anyone's name, but I don't think the Sixers' losses were as impactful. And who the Sixers lost, there was a direct one-to-one replacement who is a huge upgrade, whereas the Knicks have, I think, a little bit of a bigger hole. Certainly, if you're talking about long-term, Bridges is more of a long-term piece, a long-term fixture, because he is only 27, somewhere around there.
Yeah, he just turned birthday in August. Yep.
Okay. But I think the Sixers probably got the piece they needed more. They have fewer question marks right now. To Kyle's point, I do think Paul George, if there's anyone in the league who's more of a drag and drop, put anywhere third option than Mikal, it would be Paul George. So I think it just makes a little bit of, it's a little bit cleaner, and there's not as much of a question mark, especially now that we know that Mitchell Robinson is going to be out so long. You don't necessarily want to say factor injury into this, but yeah, I think the Sixers probably won the offseason in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
As much as winning the offseason matters, right?
It does, absolutely.
I always try to, and I did caution more so my friends than Eagles fans during the offseason. A lot of people get very excited in the offseason, especially in football, where it's like, oh, we got this big name guy. We got this guy that I know. And of course, that doesn't always one-to-one translate. In fact, it doesn't often one-to-one translate to, okay, you got the biggest, the splashiest offseason. That means you're going to succeed at the highest level of any team. He's certainly not. And there are a lot of question marks for not just the Sixers, but so we're talking about the Knicks primarily to start, right? Because it's the only team that's comparable. Because it's just Mikal, and because he has all this built-in, connection to the Villanova guys, presumably you don't have to figure a lot out on that front. Now, I think if you go further down the list, you get into, like KCP and players like that who we'll get to.
Yeah.
But thankfully, all the other additions the Sixers made, at least the guys at the top of the rotation, Caleb Martin is born to be this fifth starter type guy who just does the dirty work, will take the odd open three, attacks a closeout, doing things like that. Andre Drummond, at this point in his career, is about the ideal backup center where he's figured out, I come in, I give the same, energy, effort, whatever I did when I was, the guy, the big money player, and he's embraced and become much better in that role over the next couple of years. And so there are a lot of guys like that they added. To me, it's going to be interesting to see, how much does Paul George want control of the offense here, right? Because I feel like we've heard conflicting things from him at times. Like sometimes, I want to run point. And then if they don't succeed in LA running point, well, I want to be a wing player, right? And so it's a little bit of juggling, where is Paul in the ecosystem?
Then we go back to the question from Chet Holmgren on Paul George's podcast.
Who takes the last shot?
Exactly. Yeah. So, to your point. Yep.
Yeah. So I think hierarchy is always a tough thing to figure out. I do think because Paul is so advanced into his career and he's gotten close, but not that close to a title, I think he's probably coming in with the right mindset. I think certainly Joel, given everything that's led up to this, including that gold medal experience this summer where he wins the gold and is not the feature guy for most of that run there, and not like Tyrese Maxey we have to worry about from a character or I'm going to do what it takes to win type of thing. And so, look, it's only the off season is what I will say, but I still feel they had the best one. How that translates onto the floor, I'm not exactly sure.
Now, I agree with you that the Knicks, with the trading for Kale, bringing him in, but when we also discuss, because it is just a simple acquisition, he's the one. But looking back at the acquisition at the trade deadline of OG Anunoby, he only played 23 games with them, and he was banged up for a good portion of that time. We saw what happened in the postseason when he finally did get hurt in that second half. You add that to it, but I still look at that that Hartenstein loss, and now we add in that Mitchell Robinson piece. We talked about Julius Randle and how much will Thibodeau decide to go with the small ball and maybe putting him at the 5 sometimes and spacing out the floor to allow the other guys to have some room to operate, to get to the basket, get to their spots and finish in the paint or at the rim. But it's going to be tough defensively when it comes to those big centers like Embiid, like Jokic, and some of these others. Even when we look at players like Nick Vucevic, who we might frown at, the guy can still get you a double-double if you allow him to get a double-double because you have somebody a little bit smaller playing him at the 5. So it is going to be tough. So Kale clearly is that the only one that really stands up when it comes to the Paul George acquisition and how much it's going to help. But now we've been saying it from the very beginning. That Hartenstein piece, that's a really, really big loss. As deep as that team is, and now Mitchell Robinson is out, and you're going to rely on, Jericho Sims and Precious Achiuwa.
And Randall. Maybe he can do that, and maybe you get offensive benefits from that, right? Because Randall's expanded his range. He's more of a three-point shooter than he used to be, and I'm not saying that I certainly don't trust him unequivocally as a shooter, but bringing a lot more there than Hartenstein or Mitchell Robinson, certainly. It's just, how does that look? And do the 2 wing guys do enough around the center that, Julius Randle's not going to be called into action as like a true rim protector, right? They don't have to worry about the rebounding as much because of their team size on the wing as the Sixers do. And Randle is a good defensive rebounder himself. But they have real rim protection issues if they have to play him like that. So they have to be ultra solid on the perimeter to get away with that. I do think, though, to your point about, bringing in Anunoby, their record last year once they got him was like lights out good. They were one of the best teams in the league. Might have had the best record in the league from the point that he started playing for them onward. And while granted they had Hartenstein for that stretch, Randall was out for it. And Randall is the big sort of lingering question mark for the Knicks. How does he integrate with this group? I think he did a really good job last year as Brunson became the very clear number 1 guy. And, Randall had been a recent all-star, and, he's a guy who's high draft pick, high expectations everywhere he's been. And so he's gotten to a point in his career where he's willing to and able to take an effective step back. But now that you have Mikal, now that you have another guy who demands touches to some extent, where does that leave him? I mean, Brunson he's scoring like 29 points a game. He's a top 5 MVP finisher last year. You add Mikal, who was the man in Brooklyn, has been part of high-level winning teams. Where does that leave Randall? Where does that leave even Anunoby? Like, one of our concerns when they traded for him, or I would say when we were talking about the Sixers trading for Anunoby, was, will he get the amount of touches that he has seemed to want in the past? Like, is that going to become a problem? So how they sort things out in New York, I'm very, very fascinated by, especially because Tibbs is not, he's an amazing defensive coach, right? Like the things his teams do well, they do extremely well, but he's not been renowned for, having like the best, like free flowing offense basically ever. So that's one of his big questions this year is, how do you sort all that out?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of variability. Like, I think the Knicks currently have a higher over-under win total than the Sixers, but it seems like there's a lot in flux there for a team that's really good and has a lot of really good pieces. And I think when they had like all of their starters after the OG trade, they were like 24-2 or something absurd like that. It was really incredible for a team that had that level of success between the depth at center, the injuries at center, trying to figure out everything. Regaining Julius Randle, injury concerns with OG. There's just a lot of question marks on that team. And I say that, and I full well know that I cover the Sixers, who seem like they invent question marks mid-season. And certainly the health question mark. That's why you're able to
recognize them so well from others.
But they do seem like, for a team that most people expect will either be a 2 or 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, they have a lot of question marks.
Here's my other thing with the Randall. Let's say he is playing the 5 sometimes, right? And he does that. Anunoby can play up a little bit and play 5 depending on who that is. But the one thing that we cannot discount from both Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson, Kyle, when you brought up the rebounding, let's go back to the other side with the offensive rebounding, because that is not Julius Randle's forte. It's just not. He is not the one that's busting it. Neither he or Brunson to do that. Mikal Anunoby and Josh Hart, they are certainly the ones to do that if they're in the lineup. But if he's at the 5 and Julius Randle is doing his spot at the 5 and he's boxing out and he's making sure that nobody else gets it, all right, cool, he's doing his spot and boxing out. But they were very, very fortunate because of what they were able to do on the offensive glass from both Robinson and Hartenstein when they were both healthy. And I just don't know that that is something that Randall was interested in with those 50-50 balls and trying to get out there and get those extra possessions as those guys would, knowing that they are certified role players and that's what they do to stay on the floor. That's just not Randall's forte.
Well, and even if you were to say, Randall's effort will be there and he's going to commit on that end of the floor in terms of rebounding, and maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I think the thing with Hartenstein and Robinson is they're such big bodies that even when they're not getting rebounds, you can't lose them, right? Or somebody's got to, if it's Joel, if it's someone like Yabusele, you got to hit them with a box out, with a clear out, to try to open up that space for other guys to get rebounds. And we saw that a ton during that series in round 1 where Joel got into pretty good position. Joel was able to hit somebody like Hartenstein, and then Josh Hart comes flying in out of nowhere. And it's a credit to the guys on the team. It's a credit to Tibbs kind of instilling that mentality into these guys. But that is a potential loss for this group. I think they can get away with on the defensive end because of Anunoby, because of Mikal, some of these other guys. You can guard up positions and double and do different things, and they have enough good to great defenders on that team to not really miss the size and the rim protection. But I do wonder how much it's going to eat into their ability to be not just a good rebounding team, but like that defined their team, how good they were and how aggressive they were there. How that changes it, it's unclear. I feel like all I've done is like skepticism. They're going to be really good.
Yes,
and they're
they are.
a team that, whether it's Boston, whether it's the Sixers, you have to keep your eye on them at all times, because the one thing with Tibbs, for all whatever his flaws are and running guys into the ground and really riding his top guys, he gets the most out of his teams, and those guys run through a wall for him. And we saw the results of that last year. They can stay healthy, they are going to be a massive problem for everybody.
Yeah, like I said, I think most people expect them to be a 2 or 3 seed. We are just nitpicking between which of those 2 or 3 seeds had the best offseason.
Absolutely. When we talk about it, Sixers or the Knicks as the 2 or 3, this is why we're bringing them up to start things off here on the show. We got to get to another big acquisition that Kyle mentioned his name a little bit earlier. He is part of the splash there on our show, The Image, and that is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and the Orlando Magic. Where do they fall? By the way, Derek, when you mentioned the Knicks and the Sixers, I'll tell you about those win totals in just a second when we get back here on the PHLY Sixers podcast. As a matter of fact, I'll do it right now. We'll do it live right here because Bet365 is a big sponsor here on the PHLY family, on our show as well. And when I look at those numbers, because we know that Bet365 is never ordinary, Derek brings up those win totals where the Knicks still have one win better as far as the odds go. They're on the app. And what is it? New York, 52.5. Philadelphia, 51.5. So if I were you, I would go in and lay something on that one, because I do believe that that's going to be a little bit higher, quite frankly, for both teams with that 52 and that 51.5. And where do you go? Again, you go to Bet365, where there are over 90 million users worldwide. Bet365 live streams 780,000 events each year. Early payout offers across the NBA, NHL, MLB, and the NFL. Bet365 pioneered live in-game betting, so you can go right in as the game or the event is happening, place a wager there, make a bet at Bet365, and it's very easy as you have the app on your phone. Today, Bet365 offers the widest range of games and markets available for live in-game betting across 78 sports, and right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 using the code PHLY365 to sign up. Deposit $10, place a bet for $5 to get $200 in bonus bets. Bonus bets can be used on the spread, totals, player props, futures, and more. And we just talked about right there, bonus bets. If you want to look to something that happens with the team and their win total overall, much more, you can go ahead and use one of your bonus bets. You're not going to cash out until sometime in April, but you were on it before anybody else. And when we speak about some of those early payouts with the Bet365 early payout offer for basketball in general, you're a winner if your team goes up by 20 points in that particular contest with an instant payout on straight bets and parlay selections marked as winners. Downloading the app and use code PHLY365 when you sign up, and that 100% parlay boost. You double your winnings on parlays with Bet365's 100% parlay boost. Download the app, use code PHLY365 when you sign up. New York, no, it's Boston and Denver on the 4th that have a basketball game early. So maybe you'll be able to get in on that with that preseason game against those two teams. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Again, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER.
Well, and look, after you win some money taking Devon's gambling advice, head over to Rite Aid and get yourself some allergy medication because we are right in the middle of fall allergy season. Fall allergies can begin as early as August and last in November. The main culprits are ragweed and mold, with other possible allergens including plants and dust mites, not pants. Plants and dust mite, not the white pants either. And pet dander and fur are also possibilities. I'm way off track. Allergic reactions occur.
Can you get on script over here? Jeez.
Allergic reactions occur when your body misidentifies a substance such as pollen as harmful to the body, and then your immune system releases the histamines to fight off the allergens. These same allergens are also the cause of your allergy symptoms, such as a runny nose, itchy or watery eyes, or wheezing. That's why the antihistamines, medication that suppress the amount of histamine in your body, are often the first line of defense to treating your allergy symptoms. Here's what you can do to get relief during allergy season. Sign up for Rite Aid Rewards emails at riteaid.com/rewards to receive email pollen alerts for your area. Use a dehumidifier, shower frequently, check pollen counts on your weather app of choice, and then keep windows closed and use an air conditioner. And then here are some of the over-the-counter options available at your local Rite Aid. A nasal rinse to help flush out your nasal passages. When symptoms flare up, you can try the antihistamines we talked about a little bit earlier. And in order to be proactive, 1 to 2 weeks before pollen allergies are expected to be high, try a nasal corticosteroid. If that's still not enough relief, you can always ask your Rite Aid pharmacist for recommendations on ways to get relief during allergy season.
Slade said Derek was allergic to the read. It's a good call by Slade on that
eventually.
Liam Stevens says, that's bleeping free, 51.5. Without injuries, Sixers should be a lock for 55 plus. Derek, what did you say, 57? Was that 56?
Might have been somewhere around there. I think I went to go one up on the AI Sixers, so I picked 57.
But 51, I'm on the 51.5. And thanks
it does seem like they're always like hesitant to pick the next team that's really going to break out. So they always like, it feels like they dial people back a little bit towards the center.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit like Mario Kart. They don't want someone to get too far out in front, so they pull you back. Don't want to over-index.
Don't get me started on rubber band AI and how stupid it is in video games. That's one of the most. It's just lazy, right? And it also rewards just sucking at the game to start. And like, hey, here's it. Like it was so bad in Madden back in the day. You'd be beaten up on the computer up by like 4 touchdowns, and all of a sudden every cornerback on the other team is prime Charles Woodson. Just like, one hand.
Yep.
Hate that stuff.
Yeah. And make sure if you're watching us here on YouTube, you're also checking us out on the Roku channel. We are live streaming every day. Just look up PHLY in the search bar on the Roku channel, and you will find us right there, the live shows. And then what do they do, Derek? They just keep rolling because it's the PHLY channel, and you can watch us there live every day here on Roku as well. All right, we got to get to the other big addition in the Eastern Conference, and that was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So when we're talking big, it's not that big, but it's more big because of that young team. They're ascending now, and they needed somebody to.
And he was also, I mean, these floated as if Paul George had ultimately, if they had worked out a sign and trade somewhere, if the Clippers had retained him, KCP was going to be very high up the list of, potential Sixers guys or candidates for a balloon payment type of deal. And while I don't think KCP necessarily changes anything for Orlando, I have my concerns with them. It's just another reliable two-way guy consistent shooter, consistently pretty good defender. He's taken a bit of a, he's not going off the cliff yet, but he's not where he was as a switchable defender a couple of years ago. But you're taking a team that was already on the rise, that had one of the best defenses in the league all last year, has big athletes at basically every position. They've invested over and over again in the draft in these kind of prototype 6'8" to 6'10" switchable defenders. Jonathan Isaac gets healthy or stays healthy. That's been one of their big swing factors these last few years. They're a bear of a team to have to deal with. Like, if that's a team you draw, they were in the 4-5 series last year. Yeah. If you end up with them in a round 1 series for whatever reason, I think that's one of the worst draws you can get as a top 3 to 4 team if they don't crack that top 4 themselves. And anytime you take a team with very good young players, I think Paolo can be kind of that number 1 guy. I like Franz Wagner, although he took a step back as a shooter. If you just continue to raise the floor around them and those guys take the steps forward you expect of high lottery picks, number 1 picks, they're going to be very good sooner than I think people expect. So I don't think he changes or solves their problems, which to me are, you need a real guard. I don't think Suggs does that. I certainly don't think KCP changes that. But they will be an even better version of what they already were, and they were kind of a nightmare for teams at times last year.
Yeah, they were a pain in the butt. No, he's not transformative like Paul George can be. He's additive, and I think that's okay. It's not perfect because I don't think he vaults a Magic to like championship contender because of some of the flaws that Kyle mentioned, but I think they will be better. And speaking of, preseason win totals, them only being at 47.5 after winning 47 games last year and making the addition like that, Jonathan Isaac, you hope might be a full-time player for the first time in quite a few years.
Certainly wouldn't bet on it.
But there's a chance. I'm surprised that over-under is not a little bit higher. I think they are a legit threat to be a top 4 seed again in the Eastern Conference. I think if they're going to bump out one of the presumed top 4, it would be Milwaukee. But certainly that 4-5, they could be right there again. And I would expect for them to push, 47 to 50 wins. I think they will be very good, and I think is a real good addition.
They're going to be very good. Very good. Yeah, very good team. And the addition there with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, as these guys mentioned, when we were talking about it as a possibility, it wasn't, of course, as big as Paul George, but it was certainly something that we were like, hey, this is pretty interesting if they do, in fact, go this route and they decide to spend the money that way, because we could see when we speak about someone like Caleb Martin and his addition, and of course his goes to more of adding to Paul George and the rest, and now Kelly Oubre presumably in the starting lineup with them. If Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was here and the same thing and bringing in, it's just a little different not having Paul George, adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Who else is coming in? Is it going to be Pope? And then you're also adding Caleb Martin. Doesn't move the needle as much. You're looking at the defense and
Definitely
you're saying
not.
It's pretty solid, but who's that third guy now that's going to be there? Are you looking to maybe add somebody? Are we now really looking towards the trade deadline and trying to figure out who's that next? Or would it have been going the other route of looking at someone like Brandon Ingram or some of the other names that were out there? But for the Orlando Magic at 47.5 and where they are right now, having that playoff experience, seeing those young guys get that under their belt and bringing in someone like KCP to help them as
and
that
nearly
veteran.
Won a series already. Like that
Yes,
was,
they did.
If not for Donovan Mitchell going,
it went 7.
It went 7, and it was really up to Donovan Mitchell to carry Cleveland through that series. If not for that, and look, you can't say if not for the best star player in the series, right? But
they were
if
in
Paolo takes a leap, if
Yes.
Franz is a little bit better, and KCP gives you consistent role player production, they were not far from winning a series already. So I just think you should keep a close eye on them this year, no matter what team you are, because they have the big athletes to throw at all kinds of different matchups. The half-court offense is the big thing with them, right? And I don't think they fundamentally changed that problem with this. So they're currently betting on incremental gains being enough to get them over the hump there. But if we're talking about teams that watch them around the deadline, that's a team I could see like, hey, if we're talking about Bogdan Bogdanovic, for example, from a Sixers perspective, again, I don't think he's like the difference between Orlando winning a title and not. But if you wanted to say, hey, that's a guy that you get in there, now all of a sudden you have some real creative juice. You've got some more floor spacing. That's someone that the Sixers probably want, or the type of player the Sixers probably want. And so they're going to be competing for some of the same types of players as we approach the deadline. So maybe not in that top tier, but they're right at their heels, I think.
Yeah, and they have enough veterans with, we talk about KCP. Gary Harris came back. If he can stay healthy, Gary Harris is certainly a nice wing to have there with that guard position, can defend, can shoot a little bit, and they are in a pretty good spot. And they play for Jamal Mosley. They get out there, they get after it. They are a fun team, and adding him. So they're going to be one to watch. They're certainly going to be one to reckon with. And 47 and a half, that is a low number. That does seem like a low number. I mean, heck, we need to put something together on Bet365 with 51 and a half, 52 and a half, and 47 and a half. We might be all right, man. We might be all right.
To Kyle's point, I do think there is a ceiling on their wins.
Yes.
Just because the offense, I don't think they've changed, and it wasn't good enough last year, and it hasn't really been good enough at any point during this era. Maybe some growth from their young players could get them there, but still, I think they just need more on the perimeter. But I think their defense gives them a very high floor as well. And I'm not going to say 47 is the floor, because there's injuries, there's, people take a step back, have down years, yada, yada, yada. But like their floor is probably like 43, 44. So it just feels like 47 is a touch low. I would have expected maybe like 49, 50 to be their win total. That did surprise me. It makes me wonder what I'm missing.
How do you see Banchero? Because I didn't expect him to jump right to an all-star season in year number 2, as good as he was in his rookie season. But, man, he took that jump, and it was legit. And we were talking about all-star selection very, very early because he was that good. Do you see that continuing in year 3? Or, as you just mentioned, taking a step back, could that be the one where we saw Franz take a step back just a little bit last season? Could it be Banchero? As good as he is, could he take a minor step back?
I'm not sure I'd say I expect him to take a step back or think it's even all that likely. It's can he take that next massive step forward, especially on a team that doesn't have a true perimeter initiator? Can he become that focal point, that hub, and really create for others? That's more the question for me. I don't expect him to take a huge step back. And you bring up Franz, but like his early success was largely based around shooting. So there was always that regression or even just a down year, depending on what it proves to be. I'm not sure Banchero, I think he's a little better at creating his own offense. So I don't expect that to be a problem.
What do you think, Kyle?
Well, so I think the big thing for Paolo is expanding the range more, right? Like he's a very comfortable isolation player, but there is a little bit of that, wants to operate in the mid post, take long 2 type jumpers rather than spacing the floor. And he's only shot like 32% from 3 across 2 seasons, 4 to 4.5 attempts per game during those 2 seasons. And the biggest change their offense could make is Paolo taking and making more threes, because he will be the focal point player for that franchise. He is the guy. So you can't ask for everybody else. If you want to improve the half court offense, it can't be incumbent upon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or whatever big is playing, right? Like if it's Isaac, if it's Goga, whoever it might be, Paolo is going to have to take that step as a shooter. And I think he's capable of it, right? Like he's a smooth enough player, a skilled enough player that with more reps, more time, I believe he'll get there. But what does the volume look like? What do the percentages look like? Because you hate to boil it down to a math problem, because that's just like a boring way to talk about basketball. But that really is their big problem right now. Their building block players are not high volume or high efficiency shooters. And unless that changes in some way, you're going to hit that hard ceiling, failing, getting like an amazing guard to lead the team who can change that by himself. That guy's not really out there, and those guys are very hard to get. So I believe in Paolo, and I think he's been a better playmaker already than people expected coming out of college, but it's going from where he's at now to number 1 option on an actual contender type playmaker and shooter. And that's a big leap. But I mean, all the things you hear about him and have seen from him indicate I would bet on him to continue trending upward.
Showing forward, Banchero is already inefficient. there's only going up in terms of efficiency, and Franz had a down year. To me, they're built to match up versus Boston, similar to many matching up against Denver and stopping them last season. So it's going to be interesting because someone brought up New York matching up against Boston specifically, and not necessarily Philadelphia, where Sixers could very well be in that spot where they're going to have to match up for them also.
But that point that he brings up about Boston, I mostly agree with it. The thing that is the separator between those two teams, again, is 3-point volume and 3-point efficiency, right? Like the Celtics will have nights where they're getting up like 55 threes.
Yeah.
They will just bomb away. And you can play pretty good defense, right? You can hold them to like a reasonable percentage. But the 3-point volume is so significant, and the gap between the Celtics and the Magic, for example, will be so big that Orlando can, on paper, hey, they shot a higher percentage, both from 2 and from 3, and they can still lose that game because Boston is just going to bowl you over with threes. And that's a problem for basically any team playing Boston, period. I'm not saying you have to get up the same amount of threes, but it has to be in the ballpark, or you're just fighting a math problem you can't beat by just like overwhelming them with talent, because they have the talent advantage anyway.
Martian says, is Paolo a 3 or 4? I mean, when you look at their starting lineup of Suggs, KCP, Franz, Paolo, and then you go to Goga or whoever's the 5, Jonathan Isaac, probably coming off the bench. I mean, by position and looking at a starting lineup, he's technically a 4, and Franz is the 3. But we know it's positionless, it's wing basketball in today's game outside of being a point guard, and he's going to get the ball a lot. Yep. He's going to play in a lot of different positions on the floor and try to match up against whoever they want to have him match up against, and get caught on a couple of switches from time to time so they can take advantage of him on the other end, because he gets lost every now and again as a young player. But yeah, I would say more of a 4 for where he is right now. We have more to talk about with the rest of the Eastern Conference, some more additions. We mentioned a guy from Philadelphia.
There is an addition we got to talk about.
He's going to change some things in that city, maybe.
Change Wilmington.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, I think you're thinking of two different people right now.
That's all. We can tease two different people.
Good synergy between you two days in a row.
Yeah, we'll get to that on the other side right here on the PHLY Sixers Podcast. And I do have to tell you, as we get ready and you start getting chilly outside and you're wearing your hats, you're wearing your Scullies because you're going to be at these baseball games, because they've clinched not only a playoff spot, they clinched the division, still trying to get that number 1 seed, but overall it's going to be a little chilly out there. You're going to have some hats on from time to time. Maybe you're also doing so because you're a little worried about not showing some problems going on with the hairline and maybe some hair loss. Well, I have to tell you about our good friends from Glatt Hair Restoration. Are you looking to change your hair, change your life? Well, it's time to do so and get your life back by restoring your hair with the great people at Glatt Hair Restoration. If you are, the place to go is Glatt Hair Restoration by Morgenstern Medical, established by the late Dr. Paul Glatt of Glatt Hair Restoration, now under the direction of renowned plastic surgeon Dr. Ken Mortenstern, thanks to the remarkable bond that they shared spanning over many years as colleagues and friends. Just the right person to take it over for the late, great Dr. Glatt. If you're familiar with Dr. Glatt, same peerless approach to care, same expert team, same unmatched Glatt system, and same state-of-the-art location, same stellar results. Our good friend here at PHLY, John Marks, has been a big advocate for them for years. And with that, he's been telling many people about how great they've been for over the course of number of years. I've heard it firsthand myself from John Marks. Let me tell you a little bit about how they can help during all the stages of hair loss with leading-edge treatments for prevention and restoration, including laser light therapy, non-invasive TED treatments, vitamin supplementation, PRP and stem cell restoration, hair restoration surgery. Each patient receives a complimentary one-on-one consultation to pinpoint the best course of treatment for you, so you don't have to be embarrassed and hide your head and your hair with a Scully or a baseball cap just because you're embarrassed. Go get it fixed. Get ready for the holidays, and you'll certainly be ready for next summer. Bald is now optional, but if you want to improve how you look and how you feel about yourself, Glatt Hair has the right treatment for you. Regain your confidence. Visit glatthairmctr.com or call 610-980-4000 to get started.
And if you're dealing with any kind of stresses in life, guys, I certainly get it. Thankfully, right now, our biggest stressor is, I got to wait a few days to go to the Bahamas. Like, what a tough time we're going through on the PHLY Sixers show. But I know a lot of you dealing with your day-to-day problems, some big, some small. There's always a better way. There is a chiller way. And once you choose chill, you can then reach for an ice-cold Coors Light, because with Coors Light, you know you're getting an ice-cold beer when the mountains turn blue on the bottles and cans as they hit that perfect temperature. I was stressed yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, whenever this conversation happened. Derek brought up the idea of drinking something that's not Coors Light on the beach when we're down in the Bahamas. And I was just distraught. Like, how could you think of such a thing, Derek? You're bringing great anxiety to my head, my heart.
But if that is the most anxious you get throughout the course of the day, you're doing okay.
Well,
you're doing all right.
That's what I'm saying. There's always, sometimes you get worked up about the little things. You got to say,
not Kyle.
Let bygones be bygones. Let Derek have his bad drink taste, his bad opinions down there. I can choose chill, and I can get some mountain cold fresh refreshment no matter where we are in the world. You can get it. So when you choose to rise above it all and rise above Derek, choose chill, choose Coors Light. Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
A lot of Mighty Mos Def conversation going on there.
Yeah, I don't know what started it, but shout out to Mos Def.
Yeah, shout out Mos Def, of course.
Black on Both Sides is a classic, as is the Black Star album.
Malcolm Carrington says, my Omi says, bet the Sixers over 52.5 in the wins. That's right. That's right. Absolutely. All right, a few other acquisitions around the Eastern Conference that could help shape how things look in the East. And we've talked about the New York Knicks, the Orlando Magic. Derek, go where you wanted to go. Then since we were on different places.
I mean,
he was talking about Quinones.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different conversation.
That should probably be towards the end. I mean, we are
toward the end. So.
We haven't brought up the Nets getting Shake Milton. That's a pretty huge deal.
Pretty good one. I didn't write it down on the list.
Again, Devon was thinking of another former Sixer.
How about we go with Tobias Harris and the Detroit Pistons? Who? And look, Detroit's not going to be good. They made some changes, though. They had to make some changes. They said, all right, let's clear this stuff out. They got your guy, you and Rich, man. They got him out. He's still there.
I certainly don't root for anyone to lose their job, but our long national nightmare is over. Troy Weaver has been taken away from the Detroit Pistons and the city of Detroit. The craziest thing last year was them being the worst team in basketball, being on this insane losing streak. And he's like fighting or arguing with fans in the stands. It's like, buddy, you got to understand when it's time to take your medicine and just like, someone's going to yell at you, you're doing a terrible job. Yep. Just give them a nice thumbs up and walk away.
He gave him a thumbs up. He gave us something up already.
Also, it is never right to go back at a fan like that, but especially not when you're the worst team in the league.
Correct. But so, I mean, look, we don't have to go too far into the Tobias thing, but certainly he will for them, where in Philadelphia he represented, he's not a good enough player to go from the point they were at before they acquired him to the point the Sixers wanted to get to. Where he will help is just establishing, like, he's a professional NBA player.
Yes, he is.
He will help in the locker room. He will give them at least a semi-consistent source of scoring, and it'll be better than putting, like two centers on the floor at the same time and all these goofy lineups that Monty Williams threw out there last year. So that's really all but I mean, if you're just talking about either the money or there are not a lot of well-known, impactful guys that came to the East, right? Like a lot of them left. Talking about Hartenstein, you talk about DeMar DeRozan, DeJounte Murray going to the Pelicans. Like there are a lot of departures from the East of pretty known guys. So Tobias almost by default is like, oh, wow, he's one of the big additions in the Eastern Conference to a different team. Just wild to think about.
No, he is. And he's going to go in there and be a pro and do what Tobias Harris does. We had a chance, and when we were in Las Vegas and we were at the games, and Kyle and Derek, you really brought it up when we were on the shows out there, of the Pistons for those games, Kate Cunningham being there.
They were out in force.
Paul Reed, we saw him at the very end after they picked him up off of waivers. Paul Reed is there. Big acquisition, Derek, for the Detroit Pistons. So 2 Sixers going over there, help change the culture there. Weeze is out. Is Bickerstaff the coach? Is that who they signed?
Yes.
Yeah, Bickerstaff is the coach. And Trajan Langdon taking over as the general manager.
They have Derek's guy, Ron Holland, on the roster, who we talked about on the show this summer.
He was my guy until he went 5th, and I went, ooh.
That's
not that much my guy.
That's aggressive. But look, Tobias, he had his years here. He made his money, left a lot of people frustrated with some things, but he gets to go in there and try to help turn a young, bad team around with his presence of being a veteran and understanding certain situations in that locker room, being a voice for the head coach, the coaching staff, for those young players to help calm them down, get through some things. And we'll see them the 4th game of the regular season, I believe, as Tobias Harris and Paul Reed return to Philadelphia.
Do you think, I don't even say do you think, how hard will his tribute video get booed?
I think people would lay off of him just
for that part.
Yeah, just because they know he was a okay guy.
It's tough, right? Because on the one hand, it's not really his fault. He was the player that he's been his whole career, and they just paid him too much money. And
his jersey number was $180 million, not
right.
33 or 12.
I'm interested to see what I think it'll be mostly negative, but I don't think it's mean-spirited necessarily.
The reaction to the video?
Yeah.
It'll be a polite boo.
I think it's understandable.
I think they boo him introduction-wise, but I think when the video plays, they'll just lay off a little bit because they already
give
laid
him like
the heavy,
polite.
because they laid the heavy boo on him in the introduction.
That's probably fair.
That's
boo him the rest of the time, though.
Every time he touches, they're going to
get game ops, pump some noise through the arena, try to drown out the boos, Do what you can.
That'll probably be it. Not much else anywhere else. We looked at Milwaukee. Milwaukee added Gary Trent Jr. late on a minimum deal. Also bringing in Taurean Prince as another veteran. Good pickups. And DeLon Wright also adding to the Milwaukee.
I keep forgetting, and I don't feel as bad because I heard Zach Lowe on a podcast recently who was like, who was the other guy that Milwaukee added? And then 5 minutes later was like, DeLon Wright. Oh, yeah, I love him. And I was like, I had the same reaction. I was like, I forgot they signed him too.
Yeah.
I also really like DeLon Wright.
Yeah, so 3 decent signings, except for one of them probably has to be a starter.
Yeah.
And Gary Trent.
And DeLon Wright historically has been a pretty good defensive guy in the backcourt, but certainly is not solving their problems there. I still think having Dame, having what I would say is at least semi-compromised Middleton, right? His playoff run was good, but I think he's taken a couple steps back defensively. Yep. I don't think any of these guys on their own make the biggest difference there. Frankly, I would argue a bigger addition, although it's on an inconsequential team, is Washington getting Brogdon and just getting another professional basketball player.
Yeah.
And hopefully somebody that will organize the knuckleheads there a little bit.
He might be the 4th or 5th best player in Eastern Conference team acquired over the summer, but he might be the most irrelevant acquisition.
It's like deck chair on a Titanic, on the Titanic.
You want to feel bad for him, but you're like, yo, you were in some decent spots. They keep sending you to these bad Portland. You got to go there.
He's the fixer. It's like you got to keep him on a team that just needs to bump the floor up a little bit.
And how things could have been different because everybody out there, if you remember, as the guys bring up Brogdon, he was traded to the Clippers first.
I did forget about that.
And that was taken off the table because he failed the physical. They didn't like what they saw. And therefore, they go in the other direction. Is that when James Harden went afterwards?
I believe so, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
that's part of why that was able to come
together. Because that was in the summer when he went to Portland, and that's how Drew Holiday ended up in Boston, being traded from Boston to Portland and then going to Boston. No, from Milwaukee to Portland, then to Boston.
It's too complicated. It's not worth thinking about that much. It's Malcolm Brogdon's going to be on a team that wins 20 games this year.
Yeah, that was draft night. That was well before Harden.
Yeah. So
when Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma are two of your most important players,
man.
it's just a little hard to. So God bless Brogdon and
he's the president, though.
Alex Sarr and these other guys that are joining the mighty Wizards down there, but I don't think they have much of a chance.
Yeah. That's going to be a tough one. Josh Giddey. We talked about him as it happened, but he's
Pass. I'm not talking about Josh Giddey.
We're done with Josh Giddey. We're out on him. And one more, we're going to Reese. How do you say it? Risacher.
Yes.
In Atlanta,
he's definitely a big addition.
Number one overall pick, and we have to mention too that AJ Griffin had to walk away from basketball just because of the Atlanta thing. I was thinking about him. Had to walk away from basketball for some personal reasons. So just wanted to bring that up for people who were thinking they might see where's AJ Griffin, and he's not. AJ Griffin decided to walk away from basketball at the age of 21.
The only way I'll touch on the Giddey thing in any capacity is that on the other side of it, Caruso going to OKC. DeMar DeRozan, who was on Paul George's podcast, and he said, Alex Caruso is one of my 3 favorite teammates I've ever played with. Could not speak higher of him. And if we were talking about the Western Conference, I know I've been talking up the Thunder a lot. I know we all are big believers in the Thunder.
Number 1 seed.
That guy, getting him and Hartenstein to add to what was already a great team, they might win. As long as they're healthy, they're going to win a lot of games this year.
They could. If there's one team that could win 60 games this year, it might be them. Like Boston, I know won 64 last year. They've got injury concerns.
And they also they won the title, and whenever that happens, you can always be like, bring it down a little.
Maybe a little more conservative with your stars, making sure they don't play back to back, whatever. But they could still win 60 games. The other team up there is the Thunder. I really think they're the number 1 seed in the Western Conference.
And lost no one of significance because when you do talk about the Giddey piece, you bring in Caruso, you bring back Isaiah Joe,
and that guy,
and you bring back
Chicago is just basketball irrelevance,
and you bring back Aaron Wiggins, bringing them on some 2 pretty good contracts, both Joe and Wiggins, back to OKC. Man, they're in a pretty good spot. Really good
great spot. Especially when you look at their cap situation, their picks. I am so incredible. As somebody
who done, Sam Presti.
who really enjoys the sport of building a club and trying to build a dynasty, they just nailed it.
You and Vince can start your fake GM show, and Devon and I will just do all the games. That's how we'll run the show.
I didn't like the games. I said I enjoyed team building.
I know.
Jack Bleep. I bleeped myself.
Jack Bleep. Come on. Anyway.
Let's get to
we do have a Sixers edition.
Lester Quinones. Yes. Bring him in.
That is a bell ring.
That is a bell ringer.
Just for the name.
2-way contract, man. He played for the Golden State Warriors, Kyle. How many games did he play season ago?
37 games last year, just 4 the season prior. But main skill, can shoot the ball.
Shoot the rock.
And he's got a decent physical skill package, right? I think
6'5".
I don't want to say skill package. He's got decent physical tools.
6'4", 6'5".
6'4", 6'5". He's 210, so decent frame. And really, that's all the sales pitch needs to be, right? You get a guy who is a proven NBA shooter, shot well in college, came to the league. That's his reputation. I think from talking to some Warriors people that I know, last year they were happy with the steps forward he took defensively and play to play effort, commitment, noted as a good energy guy on the bench. So someone who's just Devon and I were talking before the show about who might be the brickin' for chicken captain this year. Robert Covington used to be the Frosty Freeze-Out guy. I think if Quinones is on the team long term, he's a good candidate to be the guy who's really waving towels. And I like having guys who are like that at the end of the bench. You do need that sort of energy from your people who aren't playing, but have them engaged in the game. You can bring the other guys up.
Turk and Ricky were good with Cove last year.
I think guys increasingly understand, if you're on the bench and you're not playing, that is your way to make a positive impression on the other guys. And those little things can be the separation between if you have similar production to another fringe roster player, but that other fringe guy is number 1 teammate, the guy who celebrates all your successes, that matters. And so I think that helps him a little bit in terms of sticking around. As long as he shoots the ball, though, He should be able to get a little bit of time this year. And I do think when I watched him, I feel like I watched him more in summer league setting than when he played last year for Golden State. There is a little more to his game than shooting. Like you're seeing more of can attack a closeout, get to the rim. I've seen him finish with both hands successfully. Always a good thing. He can hit that little stop and pop, like free throw line-ish jumper if somebody closes out hard on him. So there are some other skills that he has. And, we'll see. He's like 23. So he's got some room to grow. And hopefully, I think the thing I like compared to the other guys, he's got a realized skill set. And it's different than Jeff Doughton. It's different than Justin Edwards. We'll see if any of them can emerge as like a real roster player.
As a result, they had to make a move that you put out on Twitter.
David Jones was the guy waived of the other two-way guys. So I think that was, to me, is the right move because I was probably most skeptical of his skill set at his size. And
like the scoring, though.
You do like the scoring, and I thought he rebounded well
yes.
when we saw him in summer league for his position, but didn't ultimately show enough to hold on to him as one of their two-way guys.
Yeah, I'd probably argue I would have let go of Edwards first. I just don't necessarily believe in Edwards as an NBA prospect. He was certainly highly rated coming out of high school. I think because of that, he gets a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. He certainly has the size to do so. He's made shots. We will see if he can put everything together. But I think there is an argument between those two. Certainly, I think it would have come down to those two, though. You weren't probably going to let go of Doughton just because he's a guy who can step in and give you minutes in a pinch if you need it. He was the only one of those three. Now, four, if we include Quinones in here. I think there was an argument with Edwards being the guy. But, in terms of Lester, I think Kyle pretty much hit it. Like he has good size, 6'5", and we're talking like a 6'10", 6'11" wingspan. So he has the physical tools. I thought his engagement defensively was pretty good.
Yeah.
The shot, he now has a 3 or 4 year stretch where he's made them not at an elite level, but certainly at a good enough level to space the floor. And the question is, can he put a little more together in terms of his handle and being able to create a little bit more? You're certainly not going to ask him to create as a primary guy in the NBA, but can he create a little bit more out of secondary catch and go type actions? And if he can do that, then I think he has a chance to make a roster. And if not, then you put him in the G League and see if he can continue to grow.
Yep, light up the G League with the Blue Coats and bring him up. Call him up if you need an extra guy who can shoot the ball.
I will say we can debate Jones or Edwards. I like Lester more than either of them, I think.
I would agree. And I think it probably says something about where they're at as an organization, where philosophically they said, rather than a guy in Jones who maybe you like but is further away, they just said, we'll take a guy who's more in that Doughton type of category of we believe he can play right now. And so if you do need fill-in players to use the NBA side of a two-way contract, Quinones is better positioned than Jones and certainly than Edwards, but you keep one of those more developmental prospect type of guys on the two ways. The other ones are more, these are fill-in players. Yeah. These are guys we feel comfortable with right now. And I think that's a defensible decision.
And I guess if you're going to make the case for Edwards, you've now got two sort of like 4A guys in Doughton and Quinones. Maybe Edwards, you take the physical tools, see if you can turn him into the prospect a lot of people expect coming out of high school. That's why I do like the fact that they now give you 3. In the past, they only gave you 2 slots. Up that to 3 in the latest CBA, and I think that's a good thing. Anytime you can get more players in the in the program, so to speak, to steal a hockey term, I think it's good.
Yeah. And Winona says, so which man is he off the bench? As the guy says, he's one of the last.
He'll probably
ones.
Start.
Oh, he's going to start?
In G League, in Denver.
Yeah.
Or in Delaware.
In Delaware.
Jesus.
In Denver.
Jeez.
He's got a long way to go, man.
Is.
He's got a long way to go. We want to let everybody know, number one, that we appreciate you as always hanging out with us on this Wednesday as we talk a little bit more about our season previews when it comes to the 76ers and others in the Eastern Conference. We certainly have so much more to get to as we get started. Jeffrey Stewart says, so it's tomorrow Wheel of Fortune or Price is Right. Bring on the silliness. We'll get back to that. But right now,
plenty of silliness ahead this season.
If we can get some Plinko going in here, that would be perfect.
It does take some time to actually design games and execute them in a way that you guys can actually see them on the screen. So give super producer Bree and the rest of us a little bit of slack on the games, right?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. And folks, make sure we want to let you know.
Supermarket sweep would be fun too.
Oh, I did that one on radio, and we did pretty good on that. Make sure you go sign up, become a diehard member, and become a diehard member here at allphly, of course.com on the website. And as you do that, you sign up, become a member. You get access to the stories, the articles, the written content there from Derek and Kyle as we get ready for Media Day and training camp, preseason, regular season to follow. The Eagles with the guys, Bo, Zach, Fran, Les Bowen, Phillies. They clinched. They got it done, guys. Jim Salisbury has you covered there. And Charlie, as Kyle and Derek like to call him,
Didn't
he's just
get it
simply
done last night though.
Oh, they did not. The machine, Charlie O'Connor
The
there.
machine.
When it comes to all the fly stuff. Also, when we mentioned Zach Berman, you got to go out there and get his book, folks. The Franchise. It's available.
Baby.
Go
I'm
out
getting
there.
that for some Bahamas reading when we have some downtime.
Mine might be at the house now because I did place the order, as we all talked about. The Franchise, Philadelphia Eagles, a curated history of the birds from our great friend here at the show, our partner, Zach Berman. It dropped yesterday. It's available. You can go get it on Amazon and check it out. He's also having an event here at the office that if you're a diehard member, you do have to pay. You get the book, you get the signing, you get some food. Our GM, Vince, is taking care of all of that stuff. So that will be also taking place here soon. Next month, early next month, I think is right when we get back.
Might be getting off the plane and coming right over to the studio
So
to say
that's
hello
on the
to
6th?
some people.
Okay, so that's
No, I think it's on the 7th,
on
right?
the 7th?
I think it's on the 7th.
Okay, so that's a Sunday then. All right. Well, get the book. If not, sign up at allphly.com so you can hang out with Zach. He can sign your book, autograph, pay for your opportunity to be here, the RSVP, and then hang out in our offices, and you might have an opportunity to play some Pop Shot with Derek or Kyle. All right, let's get ready for the world-famous roll call.
It is Monday the 7th.
Monday the 7th.
Zach's book
When do we
signing
come back
event
in?
here, live Q&A.
No, we come back the 6th.
All right.
Monday the 7th, according to the events tab on allphly.com.
All right.
What
Cool.
a website.
Thank you
Fantastic.
to everybody coming in here today. By the way, speaking of allphly.com, I will have on Derek and I will not be at Media Day. Devon is our point person. Al was in the chat asking. It is September 30th is Media Day.
Which is a Monday.
I will have a big article dropping on Monday.
Huge.
While we are on the flight down to, as Derek said, drink martinis on the beach in
Drink
the
those
Bahamas.
martinis, man. Have at it.
I will not be drinking one of those. I will probably be choosing chill or doing something else. But I digress. Thank you to everyone who's in here today. And always, my girl Winona says, let's do it with fire emojis. Winona was running home from the gym, listening to the show today to open the show. So shout out to Winona for not
What
only
up, Nona?
including us in her day-to-day life, but for getting after it at the gym, preparing for a new season.
And she's going to be in the Bahamas, as she told us.
Thank you to Eugene Ross.
What up,
Says
Gene?
Producer Breeze the GOAT. We have Puppas from overseas. What's up, Puppas?
Puppas,
Haven't
what's
seen you a
happening?
whole lot lately.
Gene stepped away from a work call to jump
Look
back
at
in.
that.
Look at that.
Shout out to Provolone John. Shout out to Martian Lynch. Shout out to Prophet One. Darkness
Whoa!
is
turn
in the
lights
building.
down.
Al, the 2-minute
Sheesh.
warning, is here with us. We
What
got
up, Al?
Bootzilla.
Boots.
Phi Chi in the building. Jeffrey Stewart. We have Malcolm Carrington.
What up, Jeff?
Checking in. SB Cole checking in. Money Mar, public enemy #1 in
Money
the chat.
Mar.
Checking in. We got Liam Stevens.
We see you,
Mr.
Liam.
Sandman, who said, Tobias
Bring me a
makes my
dream.
stomach hurt.
Jeez.
You're not the only one, I don't think, Mr. Sandman. We also have Val Host. We got Jess.
Hey,
we got
Val.
Slade.
Hey, Jess.
So many of you spending every day with us. We love that.
Oh, you missed Lauren. Lauren,
Lauren Michaels.
sign us up.
Oh, no. Get
It's
us on
the fall.
SNL
We're
with
ready,
Chappelle
man.
Roan and
We're
John
ready.
Mulaney.
Who's going to do the music? Yeah.
I said Chappelle Roan.
Oh, okay. My bad.
That's my wife won't stop listening to her lately. That's another discussion. But if you have not already, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications each and every time we go live. If you hit the thumbs up, maybe we'll have some goofy stuff to end the week on Friday. Can't promise it, but maybe. You could just hit the thumbs up because you love us and you want to say thank you to super producer Bree for making this show work each and every day. We will be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. We will see you then.
See ya.
silly like the mayor.